As I said before, really a very, very deep thanks to all of you who have come here this evening to celebrate with us and to support Be'er Hagolah's really important work. What I'll say about our anniversary is that almost every day is a new adventure. Let me tell you three small parts of a much larger story that occurred on a warm May day in Moscow in 1988 in the midst of a summit between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. 5 of us from the Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry just happened to walk into Red Square, put on talesim, sang, blew a shofar, and held up cloth signs which we had hidden on our bodies, demanding freedom for our fellow Jews in the USSR. A group of curious Soviet citizens gathered around us, as did KGB agents and members of the foreign press whom we had tipped off beforehand. In the midst of all of this, one foreign media person asked a member of the crowd what he thought about these Americans demonstrating. The Russian loudly responded, "Well, what about my problem? I've been unemployed for 5 years." Within 90 seconds, a gray KGB car pulled up. He was thrown inside and taken away, and we have no idea about his fate. But we remained untouched, protected by the presence of the international press. Somebody was looking out for us. A couple of hours later, our quintet gathered outside Spaso House, the American ambassador's residence, where President Reagan was meeting with a group of Jewish refuseniks and Russian dissidents. The KGB guys who had confronted us at Red Square were there too. The biggest KGB lug waved at me. I waved back, protected by the presence of the foreign media. I knew that had it been 3 a.m. in a dark alley, the outcome would have been far less benign. But then somebody was looking out for us. In the afternoon, several of our SSSJ guys went to the Lenin Library, outside of which they joined refuseniks demonstrating for exit visas for freedom. The KGB, who had held themselves in check until then, just lost it and began beating up the Jews. A Canadian TV crew van maneuvered into the fray. The door was flung open. A cameraman ordered our guys to jump in, and the van zipped away. Somebody was looking out for us. Many years ago, when my older brother and I were kids, my maternal grandparents, who remained Orthodox in the face of adverse economic and societal pressures, urged my parents to place us in a yeshiva rather than public school. My mother taught at the yeshiva to help defray the costs. My grandparents and parents cared about us and looked out for us. After 11 years with the U.S. Army, my brother ended up on Aliyah and is now the proud father of 4 children and a dozen grandchildren, all Dati. My grandparents' only boy, my late beloved uncle, was inspired by his parents back in the 1940s to seek a Jewish education. So as a child, he traveled by himself over 2 hours each way from Bayside and Borough Park to attend a yeshiva. He later became a rabbi, including a stint in the Strategic Air Command. And Lenore. Her family's history that ultimately inspired her to attend Stern College goes from Lithuania to Palestine to Iowa to North Dakota to Iowa to Nebraska to Florida and New York. So if you've got a spare couple of hours some other time, she can tell you. So that to me is the story of Be'er Hagolah. It looks out for and cares for children of Russian and other families who otherwise might well have ended up in public school. Be'er Hagolah has inspired decades of graduates to be knowledgeable, proud Jewish men and women and productive members of society. Kol hakavod to them. It hasn't been easy at all to accomplish, but look at the results. And now, Lenore.
Usually the joke is, the person who has the last word is yes, dear. But anyway, we're starting in reverse. So there's a few stories that I want to tell, and I'll try to make them brief because I want everybody to still enjoy some of Michael's food. And I really, 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 I hope he's out there and hears me, thank him very much for doing this. This is very special that he brings delicious food to all the Bear Goal events. So thank you, Michael. Let's give him a big hand, too. So Glenn told his stories, and I have some stories too, also about Soviet Jewry. And the bottom line is, number one, before I do that, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm floored. Glenn and I are really floored. We're really very appreciative of everybody who took the time to join us for this evening. So I give you a round of applause. Let's give a round of applause, please. Okay. So Glenn went to the former Soviet Union at least 5 times and has all kinds of stories, but I didn't go with him. But instead, I have also the privilege of dealing with Avital and Natan Sharansky and Yosef Mendelevich and his family. So I want to start off with a fast story dealing with Mendelevich, and there's people here who are part of that story. So when Yosef Mendelevich came to speak, I don't remember which year, but when he came to speak, so around Thanksgiving time, he came and he ended up speaking at OZ, where we also belong. And his wife came in later, and she needed a place to stay while he was busy speaking because she was really quite tired. So I called up Ali and Naomi Sharf, and I said, could Katya Mendelevich stay with you while Yosef is here? She really needs a place to catch her breath and rest. So they said yes. So then I also followed Yosef around when he was speaking with his different engagements. And at the end of the time, he said to me, Lenore, we want to be good to you when you come to Israel. And I said, well, that's interesting because I'm going there for a wedding during my winter vacation from public school. So when I got to Israel, I called up Yosef and Katya, and they said, we'll meet you at the Kotel. So I met them at the Kotel. We went into a store. They bought me a little safer. Then we went to their house. It was Hanukkah. And so when we got to their house, Katya had made these blintzes. I don't know, they're special for her. And she was inviting her family over. It was Hanukkah. And I sat at the dining room table there, and I kept saying to myself, I am sitting in the middle of a miracle because they have quite a few children and also grandchildren. And I had to keep saying that. This is a miracle. Thank you, Hashem. This is a real miracle that Glenn and I were able to help make happen. So that's one story. The other story is with the Sharanskys, and we've had the Sharansky. We had Natan come and speak at one of our Hagolah parlor meetings. So when I went to Israel another time, more recently, and I called up Avital, and I said, can I come and visit you? She says, no problem. Glenn was at a meeting, and I said, I don't really need to be at that meeting. I really like to be with you. So she picked me up, and I went to her house, and I was sitting in her dining room area, and there were pictures of 5 grandsons over her. And I said, oh, my goodness. And they have 2 daughters, and I was fortunate to go to the weddings of both of those daughters in Eretz Yisrael at Kibbutz Ramat Rachel. And when we were at those weddings, all of us were crying. But here I was sitting in the Sharanskys' home with pictures of the 5 grandchildren there, 5 boys, I think. And then she said her daughters' names, and it just clicked to me. She said, I have, my daughters are Rachel and Hannah. I said to myself, oh my goodness, because my first daughter was Talia Rachel, and my second daughter was Hannah Rivka. I said, you see how Hashem pays back. So that's one part of our story. The second part of what I want to say is very different. So when I was growing up, I was born here in New York because my father came to meet a nice Jewish girl in New York, and he was a Litvak, and my mother was a Turkish Jew. So I was born here, a brother of mine was born here, and then my mother was pregnant, and they wanted a large family, so they went to Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, that's where I basically grew up from the age of 4 to 14. So my parents weren't at all observant. My grandfather had smicha from the Volozhin yeshiva. That's my father's father. And my mother, they were Turkish Jews. They were, somewhat observant, but not totally. Anyway, so my parents, they were proud of being Jewish, but they weren't at all observant. So my father went to the 3 synagogues in Omaha, was Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. And he first went to the Orthodox and then the Conservative, and they both said to him, well, if you're going to be a member here, then there's basic dues, and then there's high holiday seats, then there's Talmud Torah, and there's a few other expenses. And then my father went to the Reform rabbi. And the Reform rabbi said, well, if you want to be a member here, it's like $500. This was a while ago. He says, that covers everything. And then the rabbi said to him, but pay what you can. And guess where my family belonged? We belonged to the Reform congregation in Omaha, Nebraska, Temple Israel. So I've come a long way. But the point is that story reminds me of Hagolah. In other words, it costs money to go to yeshiva. It's very expensive. But the bottom line is for parents, pay what you can. And that's why we have this gathering, because we help to pay the part that the parents can't pay or don't pay. So I really want to thank all of you here, and I hope you're all very generous. Now, one more thing, and this is very personal, and I really have a problem saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway, is so you never know who stands in front of you, okay? Sometimes there's somebody who's very modest, and so Baruch Hashem, I was a public school teacher. I now make a nice pension. I have a required minimum distribution, so I have income, nice income. So there's a family that I became friendly with, and they have very bad economic situation. They live in New Jersey, and I'm paying for 8 children to go to like 4 different schools. So I can tell you all about lots of different yeshivas. So I'm paying probably close to $100,000 for those 8 children to go to school, because the minimum that each school will take from me is $10,000. And for some schools, I'm paying $15,000. And for another school, I pay $20,000 because that's for a high school. So what I would like all of you here to do, I know, it's difficult times. Not everybody has the means. But I would like, at the end of this evening, that we at least have the means for $10,000, at least maybe 20 children. Now, that's really high, okay? But if we could do that, 20 children, $10,000 in total, that would really, that would be nice. So if you've given already, and if you could pull out more, that would be great. But it's up to you, because I'm not in everybody's pocket. But I want to end, and I want to thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all being here, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lenore. Thank you, Len. Wow, incredible. Look at a crowd you brought out. It's amazing. Auf lange gesunde Jahren. Bis 120 Gesundheit. Everyone go to the back, enjoy dessert. Just Mrs. Kaufman would be quite upset if we didn't mention Mark and Michel and Ratzesdorfer, who actually introduced the West Side to Hagolah. Everyone, have a good night. Thank you so much.